Hi everybody, welcome to this review and introduction video over my Seeknit Shirotake Interchangeable needle set. This video is really something for anybody who's thinking of upgrading from their current needle set to the Shirataki one. I think there's a lot of people who might be thinking about it or who are interested in it. It's very hyped in the knitting community at the moment. And I thought an in-depth video giving you a bit of detail on the set, close-ups, show how they knit, what they sound like, and compare to another really common needle set, which is the KnitPro Symphony. That would be helpful for you guys to make your decision and see whether you want to spend the coin or not, because it is kind of up there in price compared to other needle sets. So to give you an idea of what's going to come, first I'm going to talk a bit about background of the Seeknit company, and then we'll dive into the needle set that I bought, which is the Shirataki Premium 2 set. I'll compare the Shirataki needles and the Kashitsu needles, which are both made by Seeknit, and then you'll get close-ups of the needles themselves, of all the different features. I'll show you how they knit, first of all in the round, and then using magic loop, and then also you'll hear what they sound like, because I know that's very important for loads of you. And then we'll go into the comparison between the Seeknit needle set and the Symphony, the ProKnit Symphony needles. And then lastly, I'll give you my opinion and my final thoughts on it and whether I'll continue using them or not. And I hope you'll enjoy this video, and most of all, I hope you'll find it helpful. So a bit of background on Seeknit. They were actually founded by the company Kinki Ambiari, which is set in Japan, and they've made knitting needles for over 100 years using Japanese bamboo. Seeknit itself was founded in 2016, and they exclusively sell their knitting needles and crochet hooks. They sell in a lot of nations, and I think in the UK the easiest way to get them is really through their Etsy shop. Yeah, that's just a wee bit of background on the company itself. The needle set. I've got the Seeknit Shirotake Premium 2 Interchangeable needle set. They're made of bamboo and have brass features, and they're not waxed, they're polished. And they have laser imprinting for the different sizes of the needles, and they feature a rotating swivel cord. The Premium 2 set, which is the one that I have got, has got 12.5 centimeter long needles, and Seeknit classifies their needles based on the connector, and the connector will be defined by the needle size. So you have an M.1, M2 and M4 connection type. The M.1 connector in this needle set will have needles from 2.5, 2.75, 3 and 3.25 millimeters. The M2 connector set will have 3.5, 3.75, 4, 4.25, 4.5 and 5 millimeter needles. And the M4 set will have 5.5 and 6 millimeter needles in it. What you'll also get is 35, 55 and 75 centimeter cables for each of the 3 different connections. You'll also get 1 cord connector, so in order to make 1 cord longer, you'll get 1 connector per different size, as well as 2 stoppers for each of the different sizes. That's what's in the set. On top of that, you'll also get this beautiful pouch where you can house all the different connectors, the different cords, and of course all your needles. And you even have a bit of space for more notions if you need. So what's the main difference between the Shirataki and the Kashitsu set? Both of them are sold by Seeknit. Both of these needle sets are made from bamboo that comes from Japan. However, the Kashitsu set is pressure treated and temperature treated, which makes it harder and more durable. And then it's also impregnated with a wax, which makes the needles more slippery. So you have a more durable and smoother needle as a result. The Shirataki set is polished, not waxed, and the bamboo is not treated in any way. So they are softer and they give you a more flexible, natural feel to your knitting. So the differences are really the hardness, durability and slipperiness. And the Kashitsu set will be harder, therefore more durable, and because of the wax treatment, they will be more slippery, so your stitches will glide off that little bit more. In the end, it really comes down to personal preference. But that's the main difference between the two sets that they sell. The details. Like I said before, these needles, the Shirataki needles, are not waxed, they're polished. Therefore, they have a very minimal sheen to them. They do give some resistance. The tip is not extremely sharp or pointy so that you would hurt your fingertips. The needle size is laser engraved, so it will not tarnish over time. The connection types are made of brass, and you've got a plasticky swivel cord. The pouch that you get with this premium set is made of cotton, and it has 8 pouches at the top, which house all your different cord sizes, plus your stoppers and connectors, and then you have one more free pouch. And then you have around 12 pouches to fit in your needles for the different sizes. So that gives you plenty of room to add a couple more needles on either side. And it folds up very nicely and compactly into a small pouch, which can be secured with an elastic. It's very travel friendly. Now I'm showing you guys how these needles knit. I generally find that they knit very effortlessly. Everything glides over the needles with just the right amount of resistance. They also screw on very easily. You just take them, pop them in, screw to tighten, and that's it. Now this is what it looks like if you're using the magic loop technique with these needles. It's hard to see, but the cable sits very flat and it's quite easy to knit with using this technique. And here I'm using a linen yarn with loads of strands that aren't too finely wound, but it still knits up really nicely and glides over the needles, and is a really pleasurable, enjoyable knitting experience. The only issue that I have is this part here, where the cable meets the brass connector. There's a little step, and that means sometimes your yarn can get snagged there when you're trying to move it up the needle. I've not found it to be too big of an issue, but if you're knitting tightly, it will become annoying and might be an issue. Now for the sound. I'll shut up and you can listen to what the needles sound like. Now we're going to compare the KnitPro Symphony versus the Seeknit Shirotake Interchangeable needle sets. So first up, we will compare the needles themselves. The Shirataki ones are made of bamboo, they feature a brass connector and they're polished. And the numbers are lasered on, so they won't come off over time. The KnitPro needles are made of laminated birch, they're also polished. The sizing is actually printed on, and they feature a simple metal connector. So the sizing will actually rub off over time. They feel very similar, although the Seeknit needles have that tiny bit more grip, which means the stitches won't fall off the needle that easily. As for the needle tips, I would say they're actually quite similar. They're buffed to a really similar point, as you can see here. Moving on to the cords, and first up is cord thickness. As you can see on the top, the KnitPro ones are usually colored and they are thicker than the Seeknit ones on the bottom, which are usually transparent. And here on this side profile, you can actually see that they're maybe even double in thickness, the KnitPro ones. Now, as to the cord flexibility, first up is KnitPro again. You can see that it's not the most flexible cord there is, and it usually wants to stay in a certain shape. The Seeknit ones have this flexi cord, which swivels around and is actually quite nice and easy to knit with. It moves the garment around very easily. And the cord is actually a bit more flexible. Now onto the cord connections. This is the way that the KnitPro needles connect onto the cord. You just screw it on. And then you will need this tiny pin to tighten it up with. Otherwise, the connection does come loose quite easily while you're knitting. And there's the tiniest of steps, but it's really not felt and noticeable when you're knitting. As you've seen before, the Seeknit needles just connect by screwing it in. There is no pin that you need, and the connection is very flush. The cord needle connection. So here's a side-by-side, left the KnitPro, right the Seeknit needles. The KnitPro is very smooth on the cord needle connection, whereas you have that little step on the Seeknit needle. When you're onto the needle itself, the brass connectors are flush for Seeknit, and there is a tiny step for the KnitPro needles. The stoppers. For KnitPro, you have a plasticky stopper that screws on, and then again, you will need the little pin to fully tighten it to make sure it doesn't come off. For the Seeknit needles, you have a wooden stopper with a brass connector, and just like the needles themselves, it screws on fairly effortlessly, and there is no need for a pin or anything to tighten, and the connection is flush. I hope you enjoyed this detailed overview and to see how the needles knit, what they sound like, and the comparison with the KnitPro Symphony needles. Now onto my opinion. I really enjoy knitting with these needles. I've been knitting with the KnitPro or the Drops Romance set for about 3 years now. Yeah, around 3 years. And while I like those needles, I found the cords to be a bit clunky sometimes. They can get quite stiff. I find that sometimes the connectors don't fit onto the needles properly. I've had actually connectors which did not fit, or cords which did not fit the needles at all, even though they were from KnitPro for the Symphony range. So there's a bit of sort of like fine engineering that's not happening. And they feel just a little bit cheaper. Yeah, I think that's the overall sort of look and feel of them if you compare it to the Seeknit needles. The way that the Seeknit needles connect is really easy. It's very quick to attach a new cord or to go up a cord size. I really like that they have this polished surface. It really gives to me just the right amount of smoothness and grip to the yarn, so they don't slip off like metal needles would, and they also don't feel very stiff to pull through. So I really like that. It's just the right sort of ergonomics, if you will. I also like that the company is really priding themselves into the sustainability of their products and their manufacturing processes, which is important to me. The pouch that it comes with is very compact. I mean, this is my hand size. So it's like just the size of my hand. It's very compact. It has all the compartments you need, plus a couple more, but no big fancy extras. The elastic is very easy to just throw around, and I feel like my needles are secure in here. They're well organized. They're not going to slip around even if you tilt and tip it. I'm very pleased with this. It stores very easily compared to the Drops Romance set that I have, which is just a plasticky pouch, and then if you tip that pouch over, the needles will fall out. So that's a very well thought out design. The other big plus of Seeknit needles is just a massive choice of needle sizes that you have, connections that you have. I think whatever your preferred length of needles and sort of style of needles, you will find a product that suits you in this company. And I personally always think that if a company only makes one thing, they are perfect at making that one thing. They have perfected the art of it. And I think that's almost true for this needle set. I have got a few points which I don't enjoy about the set as well. If you're knitting quite tightly, the connector can come loose. That has happened to me. I'm usually not a tight knitter, I would say, but it has happened to me when I had to do raglan increases on every round. If you've done that before, you know that taking up the next stitch is quite tough because there isn't a lot of give from the stitch below. So when I was doing that, I've noticed the connector come loose once, but that's the only time it's happened. Then the part where the plastic cable connects onto the brass connector, the part that swivels basically, that is not 100% smooth. You feel a bit of resistance, and that means that sometimes the yarn can catch on it. It's not caused any problems. I've not had any yarn rip or anything, but if you're trying to push the yarn or the stitches up your needle, then you'll notice a bit of resistance there. Again, it'll be more of a problem if you knit really tightly, because then your loops will be smaller and they're more likely to get caught on that part. I also think the different cable connection sizes can be a bit of a faff, because I can't just carry the 3 different cable lengths. I'll need to carry the 3 different cable lengths for all the 3 different connector types. However, I think you're compromising the ease over the better connection to the needles themselves, and I think that compromise is justified because the connection between the cord itself and the needle is very smooth and seamless, absolutely seamless. And like I said, you just tighten it, you don't need any additional tool for it. It also means that you don't just have to carry more with you, but also you have to buy more accessories. And then that brings me on to the last sort of negative point, which is that Seeknit aren't very prevalent in the UK. They're a Japanese company. You can find them at a few retailers here and there, but they'll probably just carry a very limited amount of needles, and it's not so easy to just rebuy a 4mm needle pair and get them delivered the next day. I think, however, their Etsy shop is pretty large and has a huge variety of different needles. I think also the singular interchangeable ones, not just sets. And as far as I've read in the comments, people seem to really be very happy with the delivery times. They say, I think somebody said it only took 3 days to come from Japan. So it's something that I'll have to see and test, but I think it's something to consider if you are one who breaks needles frequently and then needs to rebuy them and have them quickly to continue with your project. Something that I can't say anything about yet, because I've not had the set for very long, is the longevity of the needles. I'm usually not a heavy-handed knitter, but I have been known to break quite a few different needles in my knitting life. So we'll see how they live up and how they last. And I think it'll be very interesting down the lane to compare it to the Kashitsu set, to see how the material compares and if they are more long-lived. So all in all, what's the verdict? I think these needles give a very enjoyable, pleasurable knitting experience, and they're aimed to fulfill and offer exactly what the individual knitter desires, because you have such a massive amount of choice between different needle sizes, and also hardness, glide, and durability. I'm very happy with the needles so far. I love knitting with them, and I'll absolutely continue knitting with them. But yeah, I'll have to see whether they last in the long run. That's kind of the big question for me. But I'm definitely interested to try out more of the Seeknit needles, and I think if you're considering buying these, maybe try and go for one of the smaller interchangeable sets. I have heard some people say that the non-interchangeable ones are a little bit different from the interchangeable ones. So if you think of getting a premium set, maybe opt for one of the smaller sets first with needle sizes that you commonly use, and then give them a go without spending the big money. And then you can see for yourself whether you like it, because at the end of the day, it is a really personal experience and it's personal choice what each knitter loves to knit with. So I hope this video helped you. Hope this informed you enough to make a decision. And maybe if you're interested, I've got a knitting podcast as well on this channel. So head on over to that playlist and you can see what I've been up to and what's currently on my needles and all that good stuff. We can sit down and chat with a cup of tea and some knitting. So hope to see you guys in another video soon. Bye.